Brimley Finishing Academy is ruined. We were renowned for our successes, as the sign stated, well-bred young ladies taught to be delightful, decorous, and demure in preparation for excellent marriages. But what ton mother will send her offspring to a school where the patroness's own daughter was such a terrible wife her husband couldn't stomach her so soon after the wedding? Eliza winced as a familiar pain clawed her heart. Even now it was impossible to pinpoint what she'd done to make Grayson hate her so. From the moment she'd met the most handsome, spectacle-wearing and leisure-loving lord in England, she'd been smitten. 28 years old, 6 feet tall, with a lean, muscled build, strong jaw, short-cropped ebony hair and emerald eyes to drown in. Oh, there had been the odd warning that his nickname Devil was not only a play on his surname, but also an accurate description of an ice-cold bastard with the blackest of hearts. That he'd been disowned by his parents, the Marquess and Marchioness of Rayburn, for something so awful it was spoken of by no one. But in the weeks of charmingly clumsy waltzes, long walks, rare flowers, and sizzling kisses, all that had seemed ridiculous, and she fell helplessly in love. For heaven's sake, Grayson had even tolerated her terrible tendency to issue instructions and discuss unladylike topics. Some of the shockingly risque conversations they'd had, but those had paled in comparison to an unforgettable evening in the Brimley Park maze. She forgot herself completely, ordered him to touch her properly, and by heaven, he'd obeyed. After Grayson had lowered her bodice and suckled her tender nipples, he had lifted her gown and stroked the damp heat between her legs until she experienced her first shuddering climax. Unfortunately, she came loudly enough for them to be discovered shortly afterward, but Grayson hadn't even waited for a ton trial. He'd immediately proposed, and they'd wed by special license 3 days later. Cracks soon appeared. Her mother began visiting every second day to offer reminders and advice on how to be a worthy wife. Although Eliza tried her hardest to quell her stubborn independent streak and be fated as a good and obedient Brimley Finishing Academy graduate, it seemed she could never reach the expected standard of decorum or submissiveness. The more she bowed to Grayson's will, the more he pulled away, spending increasing amounts of time in his office at Fallen, with his guinea piles and ledgers, even taking a chamber there rather than returning to their townhouse. The nights he did come home, he reached for her less and less. And then came the awful day when she suggested a holiday, and he counter-offered with a choice of property and a generous allowance if she left at once. She'd chosen the estate farthest away from London, a 2-day carriage ride just north of Gainsborough, and she'd fled. The clattering of a teaspoon on fine-boned china startled her out of her reverie, and she mumbled quickly, "Surely, Mother, the Academy could not be doing as badly as all that." "It is," Lady Brimley snapped. "Withdrawals are coming in by the day now, especially with summer upon us. All because you couldn't do your duty in any way. 24 years old and still childless. The shame!" "That wasn't my fault," Eliza said hotly. "To conceive, your husband must actually share your bed. And after a while he didn't want to. He didn't want me. Because you are a twit. A brassy, outspoken hoyden who chose the wrong husband and then drove him away. I bet his mistress soothed him with quiet sweetness. Mrs. Lewis. Wasn't that her name?" Misery lodged in Eliza's stomach. It seemed everyone but her had known about Grayson's long-time paramour, Charlotte Lewis, who even had her own chamber at Fallen. How many nights, when she'd lain alone, had she tortured herself with images of him kissing the beautiful slender brunette, sucking her nipples, kneeling between her spread thighs and licking her core, penetrating her deeply with that long, thick erection of his, taking her hard, whispering words of love in her ear as they climaxed together. "Perhaps," she choked out. "Well then, this wedding is the perfect occasion to march back to London and prove you are more worthy than that trollop. If you would just style your unruly hair and commit to losing weight. Lord Grayson clearly prefers willowy to, rounded. I'm not returning to the capital, Mother." "Yes, you are," Lady Brimley